What's the cringiest thing you've seen a bride and groom do for their wedding? Long ago I worked at a banquet hall and witnessed a fully NASCAR themed wedding. During the reception they played the audio of the proposal going out over the PA at the track. It was fully unintelligible. BZZTGABAGGOMRRRY. Other highlights were the owner locking himself in his office to avoid the bride's father because he was threatening him to haggle on the costs. In the end we had to call the police because the bride in gown climbed over the bar to steal more sweet MGD after we had closed the taps and the event was over. In-laws wedding and groom and all groomsmen were wearing a tux and a ball cap. The groom had a dip of tobacco in during the wedding and I do not. His groom's cake was designed like a Copenhagen can. I was a photographer for a wedding where the bride was marrying a man with 2 kids from a previous relationship. I was in the bridal suite when the bridal party was getting ready and all of the bridesmaids had matching silk robes. The flower girl, groom's daughter, was there too. They asked me to take a group photo of the bridal party and one of the women in a silk robe was standing awkwardly to the side. I thought she was just shy or something so I waved her into the photo and the room got dead silent and the bride was like, oh no. We don't want her in the photos and glared at me like I should have known that. Apparently she was the groom's ex-wife and was there to take care of the flower girl, but why did you give her a matching bridesmaid robe? At my cousin's wedding, they did the thing where the groom removes the bride's garter and tosses it to all the single guys. I guess none of the guys wanted to be next to be married. Because once the groom tossed the garter, no one grabbed it. It just landed on the ground a few feet in front of a crowd of motionless guys. The groom tossed the garter 3 times before one guy half-heartedly picked it off the ground. The bride wouldn't look at any of those guys for the rest of the night. It's such an outdated tradition. I've been to a wedding where something similar happened with the bouquet toss and all the ladies backed away when the bouquet was thrown. The DJ ended up making a joke about it though and everyone had a good, slightly awkward laugh. My uncle not only brought up his daughter's ex-boyfriend in his speech but talked about their toxic relationship for a solid 5 minutes. I highly recommend preparing a speech before talking in front of a room full of people. Not the couple. The pastor kept saying our Heavenly Father, Daddy God, while marrying them. Edit. Thanks for the gold. For context, it was a military wedding. It was just the couple and the pastor. It was live streamed on Twitch. And the pastor was probably about 25. It was in Hawaii. He was wearing flip-flops. And a lei made of fake flowers. Oh, let's see. Groom changed who his best man was and didn't tell the original BM until the start of the ceremony. Bride and groom asked a guest to bartend the reception at the reception. Groom dirty danced with his stepmom. Full hands on ass. Bride and groom hauled their wedding party up to do a choreographed dance to Meatloaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Lights but didn't give them any pre-warning or teach them the dance. That song is 5 minutes long. Wedding was at a scenic boarding school campus during the summer. Guests were told dormitories were complimentary to stay in. Guests were not told there would be no bedding provided or AC in the building. Groom later emailed everyone who stayed in a dorm asking for money. Same bride and groom chose another friend's wedding reception as the right setting to yell at a third pair of mutual friends for not including them in their wedding party. Requiring every attendee to bring a date because she didn't want sad, lonely people on her day. Not my friends luckily, but pretended to be a friend's date because she really wanted to see her cousin get married. Potluck wedding with no alcohol or music. Groom kept showing people his flask and bragging about it. Macaroni was only redeemable thing. When I went to scoop there was hair in it. Very sad. At the reception, the groom and his groomsmen sung a god-awful a cappella version of Stand By Me. Apostrophe. The worst part was he wasn't even singing it to his wife. He was singing it to his mum. Oh darling. Darling. Stand. By. Me. Chinese weddings. Man. IDK. But one of my favorite memories from years of cater waitering was this long Indian wedding where they had a lot of random relatives get up to give a toast. Everyone's giving these long speeches and then one uncle gets up, goes, "I made him waffles once," and sits back down. I swear to God. Bless that man. Wherever he is. Toasts in general are usually terrible and full of cringe. Just keep it short, sweet, and genuine. No one wants 15 minutes of inside jokes that are embarrassing and don't make sense. Dated a girl in my 20s and went to her friend's wedding in upstate New York. In the middle of the service, the minister's cell phone rang. He answered. It was God. God wanted to talk to the groom. Conversation lasted a couple minutes. Then the ceremony continued. The minister, or pastor, used to date the bride and gushed about how wonderful she was. Told the groom if he ever died not to worry. He'd take care of her. I was shell-shocked. I so wished I could think of a reason to ask the couple for a copy of the video of their wedding but couldn't quite find a legit one. I wasn't a guest. I was working the wedding. The bride got drunk and sat on some other dude's lap for 2 hours and flirted with him while the groom sat by himself at the head table with a defeated look on his face. This might be the most depressing one yet. Speeches. My God. The speeches. Here's the backstory. The reception was scheduled for right after the ceremony but at a different location. We couldn't eat until the wedding party got there. They showed up 2 hours late because they were cruising around on the party bus and drinking. After showing up, they decided to do the speeches before dinner. Speeches from the best man, the maid of honor, a few parents and random people. I've never listened to so much boring crap. It took more than an hour to get through them all. So basically everyone sat around with no music and no food for 3 hours. The bar wouldn't open either, so we had only water to drink. Nearly everyone, including me, left after eating. It was disrespectful to their guests. I worked as a wedding videographer. This is the only bridezilla I encountered in 10 years. This girl was so self-centered she kept everyone waiting at her outdoor ceremony for more than an hour while she was pampered in the makeup chair. While she's having them redo this and touch up that. She's sort of making up her wedding vows in a very relaxed, casual manner, completely inappropriate for the 100 people sweating under a full summer sun waiting on her. Her aunt came in and very gently reminded her people were waiting on her and that it's been more than an hour, and she threw a tantrum, screaming. I feel like everyone's forgetting this is my day. Eventually she comes out. Vows are lame and borderline incoherent. And one of the groomsmen, sweltering undercoat and vest and shirt and sun, passes out from heat exhaustion. The officiant whispers to ask the couple if they should stop and make sure he's okay, and she goes, "Nah, he's just being dramatic. Keep going." As the couple is headed back up the aisle, an ambulance can be seen arriving to tend to the poor overheated groomsmen. Not wedding but engagement ceremony. They reenacted a scene from an old romantic film about two lovers in 1800s in front of like 300 people. Sorry. Engagement ceremony? What's that? This was Marizo, the bride's family. One of my first classmates to get married. We were 19, had a small reception. Mostly family and friends from high school. Nothing wrong with that. They decided to auction off the garter belt. Whoever won took it off the bride. Most of us were poor college students, so the only people bidding were her dad and uncles. It was super uncomfortable. Edit. I did not expect this reaction. So to answer the most common questions. The bride's very drunk. Dad won to the tune of $500 plus money grabbed by the couple to help with honeymoon expenses. This was not Alabama, North Dakota. And this was not the normal garter tradition by any means. Just a particularly cringe-worthy version of an already cringy tradition. They sang their vows to each other. Either had a singing voice. Vows were generally bat crazy. Like submissive in the bedroom. And not asking about where she was going. The auto-tune microphones were a terrible idea. Their vow songs shared a chorus and it was awful, and they expected the guests to sing along with the chorus. The vows singing lasted 20 minutes. Pure cringe. My friend got pregnant at 20 with a piece of guy, so they got married. It was me, our friend, her mom, and then just the two of them. They got married in some random lady's house. We sat on computer chairs in a small living room with the lady's dogs sniffing us and barking. The whole thing lasted maybe 5 or 10 minutes. After we proceeded to take wedding pictures in the parking lot of a dollar store, and then we got McDonald's. I made a little bouquet out of some ferns and leaves that were in the McDonald's parking lot. She threw the bouquet and it ended up getting run over by someone going to the drive-thru. Lol, needless to say, it was a trashy affair and their marriage didn't last long. It's a tie between my sister breaking her knee, seriously, at her own wedding dancing to the Cotton Eye Joe, and my stepsister having her reception at an honest-to-God truck stop while 6 months pregnant. In her defense, the food was good, but wow, was it weird walking through a gas station in formal wear. Giving horrible vows and speeches. A part of my family has the habit to use any family gathering as a moment to remember loved ones who died. That's not a comfortable habit for me, but to each his own. However, it becomes very weird when wedding speeches and even vows start to include great uncles who died more than a year ago. And the only people who actually knew him are my grandparents. Yes, the vows. And not even in an interesting way, but just if only Uncle Barney could have still been alive while we are getting married. To be honest, our entire family is horrible at giving speeches. There's 2 brothers, one of whom is my dad, and 2 sisters. My parents can only make joke speeches. The uncle and his family make dry lists of things they do. For example, his wedding speech for his son was a 10-minute monologue about renovating the couple's kitchen. One aunt can only boast about achievements their family members have gained. If there's no achievements, there's no speeches. The 4th is the one with the death speeches. At the beginning of the reception, we all had to stand up and sing the national anthem. To be clear, this was in another country I'd never been to a wedding in before. So I thought, okay, maybe this is just a tradition I've never heard of before here. Then I told this to other people, and they were all like, no, that's just really weird. Also, at that wedding the father of the groom ended his speech with what I'm sure he thought was an amazing joke on how it's easier to build a bridge to Hawaii than to understand what a woman is thinking. It would have been awkward enough had the man not also been standing between his ex and current wife as he was delivering it. Serve macaroni and cheese only to the bridal party. Everyone else got mashed potatoes. I was a hostess, so I got macaroni and cheese. After tasting it, there was no way in hell they wouldn't have broken the bank preparing enough for everyone. It was just really tacky because people were asking for it and I told them I didn't know much about it, I am just following directions. I went to a wedding with my ex a few years back. It was one of his fraternity brother's wedding. And apparently the bride's parents were ridiculously conservative. So conservative that they have super edited versions of every song the DJ played, including bleeping out the word shots from Shots by LMFAO. Also, it was a dry wedding, so this rendition of the song was almost too on the nose. Invite all their Facebook friends and expect 700 people and like less than 100 show up. A guy knew a couple who didn't specifically invite anyone. Just made like a public event on FB or somehow assumed people would know when where it was and show up. They were confused and offended when almost nobody came. Oh, I have 2. 1. The bride decided to sing as she walked down the aisle. She was not a particularly talented singer, and she was singing over a Carrie Underwood song so we could all hear the original vocal track. She finished walking about halfway through the song and then stood there and sang the rest of the song at the groom, and all we could do was sit there and watch. 2. Different wedding. They began the wedding with the groom playing an out-of-tune guitar and singing to the bride. They were sitting on chairs in front of everyone. Legit 400 people. And the bride was clearly uncomfortable, which made everyone else uncomfortable. That wedding also included a foot washing ceremony. And when the bride put her shoes back on, she tripped on her dress and fell flat on her face. They hadn't done the vows yet and the ceremony stopped for 20 minutes to deal with the nosebleed she gave herself. Not the bride and groom but the bride's father. I was the best man. They married young after she fell pregnant. It wasn't planned. But they clearly loved each other and it was the right thing for them to do in their eyes, both Christian. Anyway. Come the wedding day, I'm sat next to the bride's father at the reception and I can see he's looking at his prepared speech repeatedly. I can see phrases like "also not ideal," "Oswald preferred not to welcome you into the family in these circumstances," etc. Just before the groom gets up to give a speech, the bride's father excuses himself to nip to the loo, leaving his "also" speech behind. I'm not ashamed to say I swiped it and then pleaded ignorance when he returned. In the end he stood up and muttered a few words about love and then sat down. I never told the groom and I'm happy to say they're still happily married 20 years later. Update. Blimey. That blew up. When I was at a wedding of my parents' friends, the groom tried to throw a decently sized piece of cake at the bride who moved out of the way. The cake ended up hitting my 76-year-old grandma. We all had a good laugh. But we were all cringing at the same time at the missed cake attempt. Bride shows up almost 2 hours late to her own wedding. Southern California in an open field, no water, no shade. She shows up and wants to get married in her yoga outfit. The groom shut it down and when she refused to change her clothes the groom decided to leave her looking stupid and they never got married. Edit. I spoke with my uncle and it turns out he had speculation that his fiancée registered sign was sleeping with her personal trainer. When she showed up in her yoga outfit it was all he needed to call off the wedding. She ended up married to her personal trainer and divorced again. Good call on the groom's part. The ceremony also was the name reveal. They changed their last name because they didn't want to be stuck to their heritage and didn't want anything to hold them back. Turns out they changed their name thinking they could erase their mountains of debt or at least hide from it. Turns out you can't live under two legal identities. My mom and Mill insisted on doing a stage. A bit of theater often to mock the bride and groom by showing embarrassing pictures from their childhood. Cringe-worthy all by itself. But we explicitly asked them not to and they went against our wishes. So when they performed their stage everyone was annoyed and embarrassed. When we finally made it through that ordeal we wanted THD party to resume. But my Mill did another stage and we were about ready to kill her. This is my dad's story. He went to his friend's daughter's wedding reception. Before coming in, the bride and groom had this whole scene of them looking for each other. The guests watched it on a giant screen inside. Update. I asked my dad. It was live streamed. They then entered through opposite entrances. Met in the middle and did a little dance with their friends. They then had their first dance. Not the groom and bride's fault. But the pastor marrying them. Talked about his marriage and his kids for 20 minutes. He was obviously going for something of showing what marriage will be like. But he full up was talking about how his daughter, Kelsey, learned to walk this way. And his other daughter's first words were this and that. And that he and his wife make love throughout the house because that's what you do when in love. Etc. Bride and groom had to stand there holding hands for 20 minutes right in front of him as the other 150 of us had to listen about his sex life and his kids. They made this whole scenario where the bride was like a damsel in distress and the groom was James Bond and he got on a zipline and did this whole thing to save her and then kiss her. They even put the 007 music and everything. It was brutal to watch. The groom sang his vows. I honestly had to stare at the floor and slow breath to not laugh and get through it. My cousin did this. He played the guitar while singing his vows. He doesn't know how to play the guitar or sing. I was debating whether or not to share this story. My aunt and her current husband had their wedding at an old movie theater. It started off a little rocky with the officiant wearing full goth attire. They read each other's vows. And after that the groom announced he had written a song about my aunt. He's in a rock band. He then proceeded to play an electric guitar and sing a song about having sex with her. How good she tastes. And detail vulgar sex acts while on stage. Meanwhile the goth officiant played the drums. Keep in mind both of them have children who are on stage and our family is watching this. Including the bride's dad. Once he was done, they mixed different flavors of alcohol into a margarita glass to show that they are now one and made out. My brother and I left shortly after and attended the wedding dinner that took place 4 hours later that was equally as crazy. Safe to say we don't talk to them very much. Bride takes 3 hours to appear. After the ceremony, she and her spouse go up in an air balloon. The marriage did not last a year. I live in Britain and as a child there was a show on CBBC, children's BBC, just like this. The show was called Marrying Mum and Dad. Oh lord, I hate that show. It's about these kids who get to arrange their parents' wedding. They choose the theme, the entertainment, and the cake. Naturally, the kids were always making absolutely horrible occasions. Because what did you expect? They would choose a ridiculous theme for the wedding. Australia, medieval, space, clowns, and have everyone arrive dresses appropriately. Then they make the couple do some activity or another, it ranges from bungee jumping to VR, for entertainment. Then they have the wedding and eat the cake. The worst part is that the parents have no clue what's happening. They don't know anything until the day. And the children will go out of their way to make them uncomfortable, making them eat bugs for entertainment. Everyone just has to go along with it. And you can tell all the guests are really awkward. And then at the end the couple have to say just how good their Australia themed wedding where they ate bugs was. I went to a wedding once where they did the potluck. I guess it okay depending on the type of wedding. But the reception was at a fairly nice venue. The wedding couple was like an hour and a half late. And their best man didn't have a speech ready so it went on for a very painful 15-25 minutes. Also stating in there that they're going to have great sex now that they're married. This was a devout Christian wedding with many of the friends, including me, were from church. By the time me at like table 15 got to eat, I was lucky if I got something that was kept warm in a crock pot. But everything else was room temperature. We were able to go home between the ceremony and the reception. But I bet most food had been sitting in people's cars since that morning. Oh. Also the church that she moved to did the whole no kissing before marriage thing and started making out with her new husband on the altar to the point where the pastor had to say okay. That's enough. The whole thing was weird. I know a guy who recently made his lackeys, sorry friends, compete to be his best man. Most pretentious thing I have ever seen. Watching them grovel was so upsetting to me. I really hope when he told them all what he was doing he signed off by saying may the best man win. My sister, F18, and my Bill, M18, got married basically as soon as they were both legal. Neither one of them could drink the champagne at the reception. Which was just fine because they only got 2 bottles for a wedding party of 50 people so everyone basically got a drop. But the real cringe was the reception menu. Uncrustables, option of GRP or strawberry, with oranges and GRPs on paper plates with some kind of punch, absolutely no refills. I wish I was kidding. I was at a wedding when I was 8 and instead of the bride and groom getting up to make their speech thanking everyone, they had done like an awards show. So the DJ opened up an envelope, announced their names. They were handed an award statue, a Barbie and Ken doll, and proceeded to thank everyone in the form of an award speech. In the right hands. It would have been funny. But the bride and groom are incredibly shy by nature so it was just awkward. My wife and I don't dance. So we hadn't danced together before our wedding dance. Loved it. But it was cringeworthy. I used to videotape weddings so I've seen it all. This one couple from New Jersey were the spitting image of Snooki and Jay Wow's ex-husband, Roger. They were super into appearances and very over the top gaudy. During their church ceremony, they had their very white 60-years-old uncle, with Native American feathers tied into his hair, stand up and chant around the church giving what I can only assume was some kind of blessing. It was so weird and out of place. I assume they wanted to seem deep during their ceremony. They mixed colored sand together in a vase too. A younger couple at a wedding I attended thought it was a really good idea to get on the husband's sport bike with cans and dangling off the back of it after drinking during the celebration. He popped the clutch and was attempting to do a burnout with her on the back. Things got caught in the chain. The bike bucked both of them off. And they spent their honeymoon recovering in the ICU.